Jeff, you are ready. I can stop talking now about you and advise you. He is my most important teacher, and thank you for all what you did for the hypnosis field. And we are waiting for your presentation.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much. It's a humbling and very gratifying experience to be able to address you today and to speak about what Milton Erickson contributed to the field of hypnosis. And I want to paint that in very broad brushstrokes to provide not information, but to help you to elicit orientations that can begin to change into states that can be the mother of the techniques that you use in psychotherapy and in hypnosis. Now, as you have been told by many speakers here, there's a long history of hypnosis in France, and that there's an equally long and very important history about literature and philosophy that has been developed here. And that these were people who explored some of the potentials of their field. They went into the stratosphere. They went to see how could they explore, how could they create things that have not existed before. And when they were exploring the stratosphere, they could also come back to the ground. They could see, they could understand some of the fundamentals upon which their arts, their sciences, their philosophy was created. And these were historical figures who at one time existed in the margins, and having existed in the margins, then begin to weave their way into the mainstream. So my presentation is about Milton Erickson. Now, I've spent more than 42 years since I met Milton Erickson for the first time. And that was a life-changing moment. It was a defining moment to go to Phoenix in 1973 and to meet Dr. Erickson. I'm now working on writing Dr. Erickson's biography. So my speech is about some of the things that I learned from Dr. Erickson and elaborations, perhaps some provocative elaborations from me. And challenging, trying to understand some of the fundamentals. What are some of the basic things that we can understand about hypnosis? So some of the points that I want to make is that it's not about techniques. Hypnosis is not about techniques. It's about an orientation. And that orientation is highly dependent on the states which the therapist occupies. What I hope to do quickly is a little bit of a demonstration, not only to talk about this, and so I'm going to ask if there's someone who will occupy one of these chairs so that I can demonstrate what it is that I'm talking about, preferably somebody who speaks English. That will be easier for me, preferably someone who sits in the front row. So we have somebody who will come up and just sit here for a moment while I do this introduction. I wanted to work with someone who I haven't met before, who I haven't worked with before. I want you to understand that hypnosis is not a technique. Hypnosis is a relationship. And we need to understand hypnosis as a relational form of communication. And thank you so much. So please sit here for a moment. It'll just take 5 more minutes to get ready. And in this process, we can redefine something about the essential nature of hypnosis. So Erickson, think about Erickson as an orientation, think about hypnosis as a relationship. And that this relationship is based on states, and states, they are a foundation. And Erickson did invent techniques. There are too many techniques. We wouldn't even have enough time for me to present that if I had a number of hours to speak to you. Erickson invented techniques that have been carefully calculated and cultivated, techniques like his symbolic use of hypnotic phenomena. Those techniques haven't even been adequately described in the literature. And Erickson explored the territory of hypnosis in a way that no previous investigator had ever done. And he invented a grammar of hypnosis that has now become central to the practice of hypnosis around the world. And Erickson demonstrated, importantly, how all of the output channels of communication could be used to elicit effects. How you could use tone and tempo, how you could use the direction of your speech, how you could use gesture and posture. And he explored not only words, but the entire palette. Artists have a palette of colors, we have a palette. Our palette is communication, and all of the aspects of communication that can be used to have an effect. The techniques are secondary. What is front stage is orientations and states, relationship. What is backstage is the techniques that we may choose to use. And techniques, well, they're not Dr. Erickson's primary contribution. So Erickson helps us to understand something about states, and especially states. We can say that there are emotions, there are moods, there are states. And emotions would be fleeting, visceral experiences that are directional based on the history of the organism. Emotions tell the organism move forward, emotions tell the organism move away. They're quick, they're adaptive. Moods, a second area, are not necessarily adapted. They're calcified emotions, crystallized emotions. I'm in an excited mood, I'm in a sad mood, and I can't get out of it. Moods are not necessarily adaptive. States are much more complicated. We couldn't say that motivation is an emotion. We'd have to say that motivation is a state. We couldn't say that presence is an emotion. Presence is a state. Faith is not an emotion. Faith is a state. And hypnosis is not an emotion. It's not a mood. It's a state. And we can understand that states exist in 3 domains. State exists in personal domains, state exists in interpersonal domains, and states exist in contextual domains. So some states rely more on one of these domains than others. These states are basically personal states, like being self-satisfied or being creative or coping or believing. You don't need somebody else to get into these states. You can do these states yourself. And the same could be said about self-hypnosis or mindfulness or meditation. You don't need another person to get into those states. There are other states that are contextual states. And these states, like being focused and being concentrated, and even faith, depend on context. Your faith is so much more elaborate when you're in a place of worship than when you just have faith sitting by yourself. And there are relational states. Now, the point of this handout is that most states are relational. Being engaged is not an emotion, it's not a mood, it's a state, it's a relational state. It must happen in a relationship. Being humble happens in a relationship. Being concerned, being empathic, these are states that happen in a relationship. So most states have a relational importance, and hypnosis is a relational state. But also there are other states that are cultural states and ethnic states. And when you're in these contexts, you go into a different state. Now, my area of exploration is about therapist states. What are the states that therapists access? If you're going to be a traditional hypnotist, you may access some of these states. If you are going to be a traditional therapist, these states, a traditional hypnotist, you may access these states. If you're going to be an Ericksonian therapist, either doing psychotherapy or hypnosis, you're going to access these states. I will make these handouts available to you on a website. This is a tour, so I'm being rather quick. It's not about information, it's about helping you to elicit an orientation. The states that you inhabit as a therapist, the states that you inhabit as a hypnotist, determine the nature of hypnosis. They determine the nature of the psychotherapy. They determine the effectiveness of the hypnosis. They determine the effectiveness of the psychotherapy. You can't examine friendship in a test tube. Friendship is a relational state. In order to understand friendship, you have to understand it in the context of a relationship. And the same can be said about hypnosis. It can only really be understood in the context of a relationship. And so, whereas hypnosis is a relational state, self-hypnosis is a different animal. I'm so sorry that self-hypnosis has the term hypnosis in it because it's so different than hypnosis. I define hypnosis as being relational, and self-hypnosis, well, you could define that as trance. I wish there was another name for it because it creates a confusion that has confounded theorists, that has confounded researchers. Self-hypnosis is not hypnosis. Self-hypnosis is something that's different. Hypnosis is a relationship. It's best understood in a relationship. Trance may be something that exists within people. And hypnosis is not a technique, it's not an entity. So in trying to understand Erickson, well, Erickson was an explorer in a jungle, and many of us who have followed him tried to make him into a proper British rose garden with a whole series of algorithms, but it really isn't the case. It's been 40 years that I have spent studying Milton Erickson, more than 40 years. And here's how I understand his orientation about hypnosis. First of all, we should understand that therapist states are central. I saw a play in New York, and that play was I Am My Own Wife. It was one actor, and that actor did 25 different roles. He was a child, he was a wife, he was a grandmother, he was a soldier. One actor, 25 different roles, and he had a little gesture that he would use to indicate that he had shifted states, that he had shifted his orientation, that he had shifted roles. We should understand about induction, that induction can precede assessment. You cannot do this in medicine. You can do this in a social intervention. You can start with hypnosis. Erickson would say to his students, start with hypnosis. Mostly what we do is we talk with the patient for 20 minutes or 40 minutes, and then we say, oh, there's only 20 minutes left. Let's do hypnosis. Induction is a way of delivering therapy. It is not a means to get into trance. It's not a technique to get into trance. It's a way in which you do therapy. So now we can move into this demonstration, and because I need to see the board, may I ask you to please sit here? Okay, and your name is Anastasia, and we met briefly. And you're from Moscow. And so thank you so much for helping. And perhaps there's a place in which you've been stuck, and there's something that you might want to accomplish, and there's some way that you may want to use this trance in some way that it could be beneficial to you in your life. And you can recognize that when I'm talking to you, that you can really listen to me. And so one thing that I want to do from the beginning, and I need the PowerPoints also, is it possible to have both? Excellent, is to establish a moment of attunement. And I think I could have been better at that. So I started to speak as anesthesia exhale. And so I'm going into a state of and I'm starting to resonate with her. And that as she tilts her head slightly to her right, I tilt my head slightly to the left. And as she has her hands poised on her leg, I have my hands poised in my leg. And so, one of the first states that I want to enter into in doing hypnosis is social mimicry, attunement. And as you begin to think about something, as you begin to orient yourself to something, you can recognize that there's a way in which you slow down. And that there can be something that's very pleasant about that. And allowing yourself to begin to drift so that your eyes can begin to blink and your eyes can close. And it can be so pleasant to allow your body to sit back. And now what I'm doing is I'm trying to utilize her emitted behavior. So I go into a therapist state of being response ready. That whatever Anastasia is doing, moving her posture, I'm going to be reshaping that, serving as a feedback device, feeding back to her some of the phenomenology of hypnosis. And that as you allow yourself to notice the way in which your behavior begins to change, and there's a way in which things slow down, a way in which time can seem to change, so that you can begin to focus, allow yourself to just take that easy breath and allow yourself to focus inside so that you can begin to discover and begin to realize and experience yourself letting go. And how, Anastasia, there can be sensations of ease and sensations of comfort and feelings of well-being, and those sensations of ease and those feelings of comfort can begin to change. And the way in which those sensations can alter can be so interesting. Because you've had experiences, memorable experiences of ease. And you've had memorable experiences of comfort that can suddenly come to mind and give you new understandings in very pleasant ways that can be delightful. And you don't have to pay attention to the support, and you don't have to pay attention to the pressure, and you don't have to pay attention to the ease of sitting in this chair and listening. But you can recognize how you can suddenly, with your eyes closed, just take an easy breath, look up to the top of your head, noticing that as you exhale fully, is the most complete. As you exhale fully, the most complete sensation of ease, the most complete sensation of relaxation. Now, one of the things that I want to do is that I want to be precise in my communication. Milton Erickson was the most precise communicator that I ever encountered. The effect of that precision on me, well, I never felt so loved in my life. That anybody would take that much time, that much energy, and focus so intently on me. But it wasn't just me, it was whoever he was with. That he focused in that way, and he felt loved. And precision was suddenly a state that I entered into. And there was a different sense of attunement where I'm linking my words together, creating a chain and a flow of ideas that attune to the way in which people think, not the way in which people write, not the way in which people think. You link things together because it creates an attunement with human thought, with human imagery, with human imagination. And that the process of hypnosis is of me going into a state of orienting toward. If you want somebody to laugh, you don't say to them, go deeply into laughter. You say to that person a joke. You orient them toward the state that you want them to achieve. Milton Erickson has been touted as being indirect. He's been criticized for being indirect. But if you want to elicit a state, you have to orient people toward that state. You can't tell people to just jump into a state of motivation. You orient them toward. And that there's a way of using momentary destabilizations. Now, these are all states that I get into as I'm establishing this hypnotic relationship with Anastasia. And as I get into these states, it has to change the character of Anastasia's experience. And as you listen to me, and as you hear my words, and as you understand my words, there can be a way in which you can freely, comfortably, and easily utilize my words. And you might begin now to, Anastasia, begin to memorize. Memorize that sensation of ease. Memorize that sensation of comfort. Because that's a feeling that you may want to keep. A sensation that you may want to really feel, really know, really memorize. And as you take that easy breath and memorize that sensation, you can begin to anticipate moving forward. Moving forward in your life. And I don't know just how you can use that sensation and be at home, really be at home with that sensation. And how, in some very pleasant way, you can enjoy that sensation at work, inside you. And as you can extend yourself, as you can really, we would say in English, put your fingers, have that sensation in hand. It can be easy to have that sensation in relationship as you move forward in your life. In relationship to the capacity of your inner mind to guide you. And Anastasia, in a moment, I'm just going to ask you some things so that you can help me to understand. And as you lift your own spirits to communicate with me, then please help me to understand what's interesting you now, Anastasia, what's most vivid to you. Your fingers. And what is it about your fingers that's most curious and most interesting to you? They're waiting for something. And they're waiting to send something. to feel something, to hear something. And we were talking when you first sat down that there may be some area where you have been stuck. And what might that be? What might that have been? Something about speaking in public. And that your fingers and your hands and your arms and your body can feel the ease, can hear the ease, can give voice to the ease of that sensation, and that sensation can be with you here and now. And that sensation can be with you there and then. And that as Anastasia, you memorize that sensation. It can really be with you. I can remember a moment in which I was teaching one of my first classes when I was in graduate school. And there was a woman in the class, and she was an older woman. And she had her lips pursed, and she was looking at me, and I thought she was critical. And I did a terrible lecture. The next day she wasn't there, I did a wonderful lecture. The next day, Wednesday, she was there again and seemingly looked critical. And again, I got self-conscious. Thursday, she wasn't there, I did fine. Friday, she was there again, and again I thought, she must be critical. So I went to my professor and I said to him what was happening. And my professor said to me, "You know something about hypnosis." And my professor indicated to me, "You have experience with hypnosis." And I thought, yes. And I realized yes. And I could remember, yes. And he said to me, "Well, you have experience in hypnosis, and you can utilize what you know. Just utilize what you know." And I thought, yes. And he said, "Come to my class and watch what it is that I do." And he was teaching a class right after lunch on Friday. And I sat on the side of the room and watched. And he was telling obscure jokes about Freud and Jung. And obviously, the mentality that he had, that feeling that he had, was, yes, have a good time. And that there was an invitation to the audience. And the invitation to the audience was, have a good time. And that if you wanted to sleep or do anything else, you were welcome to. Because his mentality, that feeling that he had was, have a good time and enjoy. And he said to me after the class, "What do people look like when they go into trance?" And the implication was, when you see the class, what do people look like when they go into trance? And Anastasia, I don't know just how you can begin in your way, in your time, in the way that's right for you, to utilize the meaning that you can extract. That you can extract in your mind, that you can extract in your body, that you can feel in your hand. And realize that it's with you. Now, in the process of doing this, I have entered into many different states. And these are an understanding that hypnosis is something that's conversational, and that I'm going to be involved in communicating in a process of set up, intervene, that I'm going to use stories and metaphors, that my job is not to connect the dots for any client. My job is to create the dots. Maybe you played that game when you were a child, where you would connect the dots. The joy is to connect the dots. Therapists spend too much time connecting dots for their clients rather than creating dots that clients can assume. And I suppose that the most important therapist state is a state of congruent caring. Now, it was really my hope that I would illustrate to you in a much more sequential way, entering into each one of these states, but the exigencies of the situation made it much more of a sense of amalgamating all of these different states that I've practiced entering into over the last 40 years. These are therapist states. The first state of hypnosis does not belong to the patient. The first state belongs to the therapist. The therapist invents substates that dramatically influence the nature of the client. Okay, so it's really not a matter of trusting the unconscious. It's not a matter of speaking to the unconscious. It's a matter of understanding that we all have procedural memory. You didn't have to think about how to put on your shoes this morning, you just did it. It's procedural. And procedural learnings trump working memory. We want things to happen seamlessly in procedural memory as soon as possible. And Anastasia, you can begin to grasp some of the meaning. You can begin to extend yourself, to realize some of the ways in which you can bring into your body, ways in which you can move into the heart of your experience, the learnings that can help you to really enjoy the moment and really appreciate how you can be in touch in a very heartfelt way with the capacities of your inner mind to guide you. Recognizing that as that hand moves up to touch your face in that step, wise movement, that you can really now turn a new page in your life in which there can be that feeling just for you so that you can enjoy it. And Anastasia, is it okay to begin to reorient you? That's right. That's right. And is it okay to begin to reorient you? And you can reorient now, here, now, completely now, here. Just take 1 or 2 or 3 easy breaths. Take 1 or 2 or 3 easy breaths and then bring yourself back fully alert. Now, when we started, If this was the scale, and this was how convinced you were that you could accomplish your goal when you started, and this is, you're really convinced that you can accomplish your goal, where are you now? Show me. Fantastic. It's a good feeling? Really good. Thank you so much for helping and for coming up here. Can we express our appreciation, Anastasia? So, in conclusion, hypnosis is a relational state. It's like friendship. It's like marriage. You can't examine marriage outside of the relationship. And that the states that I assume alter the nature of the trance, the internal experience of Anastasia. So the hypnotic relationship is influenced by the gifts that you bring. One of my students, Vera, made that sentence very clear to me, so I call it the Vera principle. My meta state is, what is it that I want to offer to Anastasia? What is it that I want to offer? How am I going to offer that? And what I hope that I leave you with is the possibilities of exploring our genre. Our genre as therapists, our genre as hypnotists is artistic. Let's explore our palette. Let's use all of the tools. Smiling when you're doing hypnosis, gesturing when you're doing hypnosis, speaking in nonverbal language. This is what Erickson did. So for the handouts, this handout is now available on jeffreyzeig.com/handouts/ISH2015. jeffreyzeig.com/handouts/ISH2015. And I invite you to, we have a booth about the Erickson Foundation. We have this movie, The Wizard of the Desert, that we're making available. And so if you look at the Erickson Foundation booth, you can see some of the things that we're doing. I'll be back in France twice next year, once for Claude Bureau and once for my friend Leonid in Toulouse. So I hope to see many of you again, perhaps next year. And thank you so much.